Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the U.S. will revoke more student visas in the coming days. At a G7 meeting in Canada Friday, Rubio accused some student protesters with visas of holding universities, quote, hostage.
In the days to come, you should expect more visas will be revoked as we identify people that we should never have allowed in because they lied to us. When they said they were coming here to be students, they didn't say they were coming here to occupy university buildings and vandalize them and tear them apart and have campuses hostage. If they had told us that, we would never have given them a student visa.
Earlier this week, Secretary Rubio also defended the detention and possible deportation of Khalil, claiming the issue is, quote, not about free speech. For more, let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. She's a professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. So, Jessica, what do you make of Secretary Rubio claiming that pro-Palestinian protester Mahmoud Khalil's detention is not about free speech?
So what he's arguing here is that this is about a federal statute that gives him, as the Secretary of State, the power to revoke green cards. And I'm going to paraphrase the statute. We should note that it's not used often in this type of circumstance. That essentially says when there's reasonable grounds for the Secretary of State to believe that somebody presents a national security issue, then things like their green card status can be revoked. A green card, of course, is not a right. It's a matter of administrative grace. And this certainly is the argument we are going to be hearing from the government. Now, of course, Khalil's argument is he's being targeted based on lawful conduct and specifically protected speech. And this is nothing more than government censorship.
So everyone in the U.S. is protected by the Constitution. Where does that end? And how can the United States revoke student visas or green cards?
It's a great question. I should say that some constitutional provisions talk about citizens, some talk about people. But in this case, we're talking about the First Amendment rights that would attach to Khalil. Now, with respect to kind of the boundaries of this, what I would say is what we're seeing is that every administration has very different responses. And I don't mean to be flip here, but to how aggressively they can enforce immigration laws that are on the books. When it comes to this particular statute that we've been talking about that gives the Secretary of State the power to revoke green card status for people who are viewed as essentially a threat to national security, we don't have a lot of case law on how far administrations, the executive branch, secretaries of state can go in using those statutes, so, which is a way of saying, as in so many other things, I think this case could be a stress test on the boundaries of executive power in this situation.
So what does that mean in terms of how far you think this case will make it?
So will it go to the Supreme Court? I think is what a lot of people have been asking. And certainly this is a big question for a number of the Trump administration actions here. The Supreme Court typically takes cases where they think there is a big federal constitutional question or federal question, or there's a circuit split. I would say based on the conversation we're having a conversation about whether or not there is a First Amendment issue in this case. And I think, honestly, it depends on who wins in the lower courts. And if Khalil wins in the lower courts, then it really is up to the Department of Justice if they want to bring this all the way to the Supreme Court.
Well, Jessica Levinson, thank you as always.